So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. To understand atheist and agnostic as well as...
Hi, Preston.
Hi, Katie.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm snazzy.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm excited for today's episode
Of the Holy Watermelon Podcast.
We've been on a spiritual journey, pun intended. We've done all the world's religions, major religions.
Yeah,
We talked
pretty much.
about belief and why people believe the things they believe, which there was no answer to that question. So,
We've examined what a god is, what religion really is, and may or may not be, which of course is still way too nebulous and tricky.
we got into cults
Yeah,
last episode.
it's been
Now,
pretty great.
I think we're ready for the real hard-hitting content.
Ooh, I'm ready for it. In fact, there's a nifty article that I want to tell you about.
Oh, before we get into it?
Before we get into it,
Okay, I don't know what this
the
is.
most read article on explorefaith.org in 2005, written by John M. Sweeney, well-respected Catholic author. Would you guess what his article was on?
Probably Catholicism.
One would think with the preface I gave.
2005, was there a Pope thing happening then?
You know, I don't
I
remember
don't
when
either.
things were
Maybe
going on.
Benedict in 2005.
You know what? That sounds close to right.
I was in high school when Benedict came in. Am I right?
Oh, I'd have to Google that.
Clearly I'm not right. If you have to.
I feel like Benedict was new in office in 2005. Yeah. So that's a fair guess. I like it.
You.
No, in fact, Sweeney's most popular article on explorefaith.org in 2005 was on Jediism.
Like,
The Jedi from Star Wars.
you're not just saying Judaism wrong.
No.
Okay. That's not how it's said, Preston. We've been over this one.
Now I'm just thinking of Spaceballs. She doesn't look Jewish.
That's a good sneak peek of our episode. So first, I want to say thank you to our listener, Tim, for inspiring this episode. He specifically wanted us to talk about the Church of the Latter-day Dude, or more commonly known as Dudism. And we figured we couldn't talk for a full hour about the Big Lebowski. So we have put together a whole episode of Parody Religions for you today. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Thanks for that suggestion. And we've found some great material to surround this whole topic. And if you'll remember from our episode, talking is hard for some reason.
That's bad when you're a podcaster.
Right? Amateurs. If you remember from our episode about religion and what is religion, you'll remember it's way too hard to define. So you'll see some parts of these religions that will look an awful lot like they're legitimate religions.
And who are we to say they're not
Right?
legitimate? This is part of the big questions we'll be getting into today. But let's start with religious parody and religious satire as sort of a high level. And then we'll get into some of the fun specific ones like Jediism and Dudism.
For sure. All right. You did a little bit of research on what most school teachers will tell you not to do, but it looks really good and it's worded really well. What do you got?
I don't know. I feel accused. He means I went to Wikipedia.
Wikipedia is not a source in itself, but it is an excellent tool for research.
Yes.
Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
So basically, Wikipedia defines a parody religion or mock religion as something that challenges conventional or mainstream religious belief. It can parody several religions, or it can
be a little more focused.
Or it can be a little more focused. Thank you. I was going to say, or it cannot be based off of any particular religion at all.
It could just be the idea of religion in
Or
general.
I was going to say a commentary on religion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is what a parody religion is. But as Preston mentioned, this is where it gets so convoluted. There are beliefs and practices that look more conventionally religious. And then how do you separate someone who's perhaps just taking the piss from someone who legitimately believes? And how can you tell, right? You can't, as per our belief episode, you can't tell someone that if they're telling you that they genuinely believe in Jediism, who are you to say that they're not, or that they're wrong, or that it's a joke religion? So this becomes convoluted.
It's tricky to say you have a place to tell them that their religion that is obviously new and constructed on popular culture is nonsense and that they're wrong. But
when yours was but just 2,000 years ago.
Right. But
I said it. I said what I said.
You can't tell somebody that they don't get to believe a thing if their experience tells them that they do.
Well, and we'll get we'll touch on proof of burden today.
Oh, for sure.
And we'll touch on proof of burden even more next episode. Teaser. Yeah, we'll talk about proof of burden today because that's a big part of parody religion, I think. And I have some favorites for that very reason.
Of course.
As an atheist, of course. There's also religious satire, and if you've been on our Discord, I've been calling this episode satirical religions, and satire is not quite the right term for it, but religious satire is
it's a thing.
It's a thing. And this feels as good of an episode as any to bring it up.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And a little bit, like, very similar, but slightly distinct from that.
Satire parody. Let's all go back to high school English class.
Right. A little bit different, but still connected, is the satire which targets clergy, which doesn't show up a whole lot in parody religions, but you'll definitely see loads of this phenomenon if you follow a handful of our favorite comedians, maybe.
And even you'll see it in political cartoons if
Oh,
something's
lots.
topical.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that satire which targets the clergy is definitely more of a political satire than a religious satire, because you're targeting a person in a position of authority rather than the beliefs of the group.
So my understanding, and jump in, please, is that the difference between a parody religion is, so parody religion is, I don't want to say entirely new ideas because we know that's wrong, but it's its own entity, whereas religious satire is critiquing an existing religion in a hilarious way. And I honestly didn't even think about this example until I was reading up on it, but Life of Brian, and even to some extent Monty Python and the Holy Grail is a great example of religious satire where they essentially make fun of the life of Jesus.
I'm not the Messiah. He is the Messiah.
And this comes up more with satirical religions than with parody religions, but it's this idea of freedom of speech and how much we're allowed to have a commentary, especially this idea of making fun of a religion, what level is appropriate. I think you know from our podcast where we stand on that. I don't actually think religious satire is a bad thing.
I think it's healthy to be able to criticize both people for their actions and the thoughts that they are willing to hurt others to protect. For sure.
And I also think, like, if you're going to be critiquing anything, especially something so serious and where people can get hurt, why not do it with humor?
Right.
It just makes it that much more comfortable.
It makes it more palatable, too.
Right? If you can laugh at yourself or your group or whatever, or even, at others, then that's a lot better than fighting each other, I think.
Right.
So that's my thought on religious satire. I think that's probably all we'll touch on it today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, as I alluded to in episodes past and the beginning of this episode just a little bit, there's some big questions that I want to keep in mind as we look at these religious parodies and weird pseudo religions.
Para-religions. Even.
Para-religions.
I was going to bring that
Sure,
word
why
back
not?
up again.
I like it. So the real question, the big question with sub-questions is it fair to call them religions at all? Remember, we don't have one solid, everybody agrees on this definition of religion. So things get tricky already.
I was dived into the conversation yet.
Your verb use is
I don't
awful.
actually. Not having gotten into the meat of the conversation, my guess is that it's a spectrum.
Right.
Spectrum. I think I said that too quietly. Spectrum. Spectrum.
So some ideas that can help us with this question. Again, pretty subjective and tricky, but we're going to go ahead anyway. Number one, are they real systems of deeply held beliefs? Some people genuinely deeply hold that Jesus is their savior or that Muhammad is the last prophet that there ever can be. And some similar tiered values we're going to see in some of these groups. There's also the question of belief that is hugely important to those people who like to undermine the claims of some of these groups that they can only be joke religions and should never be taken seriously. But does religion bear the prerequisite of full dogmatic belief in each of its doctrines? What about those people who belong to various churches that happen to doubt one or many of their doctrines or are straight up skeptical of the whole thing but still belong to the community?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you don't have a connection to the Force, but you still identify as a Jedi. Who gets to tell you you're not a Jedi?
Nobody, Preston. Nobody. I almost want to answer one of your questions now.
Okay.
But I don't know if I'm jumping the gun.
Go for it. Are you going broadly or are you thinking of a specific religion?
I can speak quite broadly and I'll bring it.
Go for it.
Preston has mentioned like how deeply do some people believe? And of course, I've already said it, take a shot. It's a spectrum. So I'm sure for each of these parody religions that we're about to talk about, there are people who hold this deeply as a belief. 7 billion people, of course, there's someone who really, 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 truly believes in the Church of the Flying Spitting Monster, for example. But that being said, and Pastafarians are one of them, that they're parody religions as a critique of religion. So I'll point them out when we get to them, that there are these set of parody religions we're going to talk about where the whole idea is that believing in a higher power can't be proven. So I would say in that group, which like I said, I'll point out, those beliefs are less deeply held because it's just a critique of.
Yeah, some of the groups we're going to look at are definitely just exercises looking at Russell's teapot. And others are actual committed philosophies.
Let's do the Russell's teapot at the end and we'll do the actual philosophies
for
first.
sure.
I didn't separate them that way in the notes, but now I'm like, that would probably be a good way to do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're improvising, guys.
All right. Now, according to the request that launched this whole idea, we're going to start with the Church of the Latter-day Dude.
Church of the I love that name so much.
Pretty great.
Church of the Latter-day Dude or Dudism.
Right. So it's mostly inspired by the film The Big Lebowski.
Where he is called the Dude.
The Dude. Good old Jeff Bridges. Super chill most of the time.
And he's not a dudist himself, but he
Right.
thinks it's pretty rad that dudism exists.
Wouldn't you? If you did a movie and everyone is like, we're starting a religion based off of your portrayal of this character in this movie, you'd be flattered too.
You know what? I didn't like The Big Lebowski.
Oh, the movie's not that good.
Okay, I was like, I feel like that's a really important. I watched it with your wife probably 10 years ago.
And she hates
We both
it.
hated it. So I don't want to digress too much,
I
but
had to watch it without her.
so Preston's wife and I went to school together, and we had a school project that was themed on The Big Lebowski. And so it sounds cool, but the teacher made us watch The Big Lebowski in class. And this is university, right? Like 2 free classes of university for a movie. Like that's elementary school stuff. And we couldn't stand it. And it was just like, sorry, probably to Tim. I assume you like The Big Lebowski if you're into dudism, and anyone else who's listening. But we're gonna cover it for you anyway.
I got a side
I can
thought.
move my. Okay.
I just realized this. So I'm sharing this with everybody all at the same time
Oh.
through this wonderful medium of the podcast where none of this is actually contemporaneous. So I just realized just now, The Big Lebowski is basically the same thing as John Wick. Just replace the dog with the carpet. And John Wick got several sequels.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Somebody out there in Radio Land knows what John Wick is.
Oh, I know. Somebody's gonna like hop on our Discord and be like, Katie, why don't you know what this is? Here's a link. But I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm sure it's a great analogy. I'm really proud of you.
For those who know, they'll be like, oh, yeah. Or maybe they'll disagree with me and we can chat it up on our Discord server.
Which we're clearly plugging. All right. Church of the Latter-day Dude is based off The Big Lebowski, as you said. It's also has some tenets of Taoism in it, which we didn't spend an episode on Taoism, but it's similar to Shintoism, a little bit like Buddhism.
It's more complicated than Shintoism,
Yeah.
but similar in a lot of ways.
It's very reflective
Very reflective.
and very meditative. So yeah, something if maybe we'll do an episode on Taoism one day, but it's very similar to Buddhism or Shintoism in that you are trying to elevate yourself and remove yourself from the everyday cares and sufferings of the world. So
It's kind of interesting that even though this is a new religion based on a pop culture phenomenon, the practitioners of Buddhism tend to take it pretty seriously.
they do. Yeah. This is one of those ones where, yeah, people take it pretty seriously. There's lots of books on it and lots of like doctrinal readings. They're all like, I mean, they're all very modern.
Yeah.
In comparison, The Big Lebowski is fairly new compared to, you know, the Bible.
For sure. With that comparison, yeah.
So Buddhists have a doctrine that will actually look quite similar to the Buddhist doctrine. I actually saw a comparison side by side on life is suffering, you can overcome suffering, and what's the third point I'm missing?
Wasn't the third point the escape is nirvana?
Something, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's those 3 same questions are asked relative to Buddhism.
Yes.
And what are those answers? So
Buddhism is trying to liberate us from thinking that's too uptight.
yeah,
Life is suffering. Buddhism is trying to bring us to the state of just taking it easy, man.
I love it.
And how do we get to this state is by abiding. The dude abides. So there's its mirror in Buddhism.
Right. It's nice and simple. Just relax, let it be. It's very zen.
Yes.
It's pretty great. There's a lot of philosophies that have been picked through to pick out the most easygoing bits to make this philosophy.
Yeah. Their high holy day is March 6th. It's the day of the dude. It celebrates the release of The Big Lebowski in theaters.
I mean, if you're going to pick any day, why not that?
I mean, how else would you pick that?
All right. And even you can be ordained as a dudist priest. There's about 600,000 in the world.
That's a very high number.
Right? Like, that's alarming. That's more than 500,000.
Yes, 600,000 is more than 500,000. Very good.
But I just like when the word million is useful, it helps to actually use it to understand scale.
I'm sorry.
600,000, just like that's a number you stop paying attention how big it is. Mm-hmm. More than 500,000.
Yes, and so because you can be an ordained dudist, I think it's more common in the States. Canada has stricter laws on who can perform marriages in the States, but you can perform marriages as a dudist priest.
Yeah, I think in Canada it's just left up to the provincial governments, and where we are, those restrictions are quite tight.
Yep. Yeah, so I don't remember if it was Judaism or Pastafarianism where there have been some serious debates on like who can perform, like, is it all right to ordain a dudist to perform a marriage? Like, is it actually a religious thing?
That's a great question that I think was related to the spaghetti monster. I think I actually have that in our notes.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. Cool. That's Dudism. The dude abides.
The dude abides. Nice and simple.
The Church of Subgenius. I don't think that's our Russell's Teapot, is it?
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is. It's pretty out there to be. It's too out there.
Yeah. The Church of the Subgenius is a really odd group.
Yep.
I couldn't really find lots of information that would be useful or interesting for this, but I did find a little bit.
It's a very like sci-fi based religion, not quite to the, obviously not like a Scientology. I don't think it has any cult tendencies, but it does have this weird scientific basis that I'll let Preston get into.
So the Church of the Subgenius was founded in the 1970s around this fictional character. I need to emphasize that this person never existed.
When I looked it up, I thought he existed. So, yes, emphasize this.
So, J.R. Bob Dobbs. Bob is always written with quotation marks around it, no exceptions. J.R. Bob Dobbs is a fictional salesman back in the 50s. It is claimed that while messing around with the TV, he received a vision from Jehovah One. That's spelled JHVH dash the numeral 1. Which sounds suspicious already, but that's not enough grounds to dismiss a thing. And the story within this Church of the Subgenius is that Bob started the church back in 1953. Remember, the church was actually founded in the 70s.
I mean, I like that. A different origin story.
Right? It's totally fine to lie about your history. I mean, if you look at a lot of scholarly works looking at Christianity, loads of people say that Jesus was a collective invention of his apostles, which is tricky and unpopular, but it's a position that a lot of people hold to.
Yep.
And so the number one founder of this group, there's a few names that are important to this group, but the fella named Drummond, which is an assumed name, not his name from birth.
Still no real names.
Yeah, nobody's using the real names.
Smart.
Drummond was contacted by this Bob salesman, J.R. Bob Dobbs, telepathically
Ooh.
in 1972. And then a year later, Drummond reached out to, a few more people. And over the course of a few years, they had actually collected, I want to say, a couple of hundred people who are committed followers. We don't know how committed
I was going to
they
ask
were.
how big this is. I don't think it's very big.
It's not a huge group, but
People
it's,
do it to be ironic.
as far as I can tell, it's still around,
Oh, interesting.
which is pretty impressive for this weird religion that popped up 50 years ago,
That's impressive.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've mentioned the flying spaghetti monster a few times. I really doubt the flying spaghetti monster is going anywhere. I think it's here to stay, at least for a while.
He's physically going because he's flying, but
Sure.
that was a bad joke.
A little bit, but I liked it.
Thanks.
So one of the biggest, most important ideas of the Church of the Subgenius is that all conspiracies, all of them, every single one, is just a lesser conspiracy to the great conspiracy. And
Part of me wants to comment on what the great conspiracy is, but that's not our place.
it's far too complicated for any one person to be able to nail down exactly what it is, which sounds like a real problem.
Well, I feel like this might get cut out, but Brian says that if you follow any conspiracy theory long and like far enough, it all ends up in anti-Semitism. It was all the Jews. That's the great conspiracy. It wasn't. Don't misquote me on that. But yeah, if you follow any chemtrails or lizardmen far enough, it was the Jews. It wasn't. But that's the first thing I think of when you say the great conspiracy is anti-Semitism.
It reminds me of Arrested Development. Some old guy wants to blame the dinosaurs as something that the Jews put there to confuse the Christians.
Great prank. I love that.
Right.
Good.
It's actually kind of nifty. There was a pamphlet published by the Church of the Subgenius in 1979 that criticized all popular concepts of God, but also all New Age spirituality
Interesting.
as part of this conspiracy thing to control people, and also it's more especially New Age spirituality of this idea of consumerism, that the two are inseparable, and they really wanted to basically jam up consumerism.
Interesting.
I have to admit, I didn't look very hard, but I didn't find any testimonials for the Church of the Subgenius.
So we don't believe in it. I'm kidding.
I mean, I don't.
Someone does.
I think that there might be somebody that does.
Yeah. Now, this next one, I feel like you're very excited for.
I think it's pretty cool. I did all kinds of research on this.
Judaism. Oh, Jediism.
It's only a couple of letters off, but they're important letters.
Very important letters. This is the whole Yahweh, Jehovah thing again.
I mean, there's a lot of books out there that draw parallels between the Christian or the Judeo-Christian faith and Jediism and the Force in general.
Well, we had this conversation in our religion as pop culture episode, Jesus on the Silver Screen. I think it was episode 4. It's been a minute. Where we talk about how narratives are written, and the Bible and Star Wars follow the same narrative story or narrative structure. So yeah, of course there are parallels.
Well, the monomyth, as described by several scholars, including Joseph Campbell, definitely looked at the big religions to construct what really is the layout of the monomyth.
Yeah.
And George Lucas deliberately sculpted his Star Wars story using Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces.
Yeah, it's a story structure that's worked for 2,000 plus years. So.
Yeah. And so this religion that has popped up is basically just people saying,
something dark side.
don't join the dark side, be a good person, follow these handful of morals that we see associated with the Jedi. And that's pretty simple. Minimize your time dwelling on negative emotions. Don't become a Sith Lord.
Don't become a Sith Lord. Don't kill your wife with your negative emotions.
Right?
You're killing me, Annie.
My wife and I just watched Revenge of the Sith.
Nice.
Like Thursday. No, it wasn't Thursday. It must have been Wednesday or Tuesday. It was this week.
I haven't seen that in years. Now I kind of want to watch it.
I mean, it's not that good, but we're doing a run through of the whole
It's better
series.
than Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
So Jediism is incredibly popular.
Yes. I mean, Star Wars fans all around the world are huge in number.
There's difference between being a Star Wars fan and being a Jedi.
It's absolutely true. And so in 2001, we saw the scope of this issue. There was a worldwide phenomenon. Loads of countries had their census in 2001. And
this was right after episode 1 came out.
yeah.
2001. So I was like wondering why the numbers were. We'll get into the numbers.
Yeah,
but
people
they're so
were
high in
very
2001.
excited about the newest Star Wars movie, looking forward to the next one, hoping Jar Jar Binks had a smaller role in the next one. Luckily, he did. And in 2001, huge numbers of people reported on the census that they belonged to the Jedi Order, or that they were Jedi, or that they were Jedi Knights. Variations using the word Jedi is the important detail here. That in 2001, Australia reported more than 70,000 Jedi on their census.
Wow.
Canada reported about 21,000. New Zealand reported 53,000 Jedi in 2001. Scotland reported more than 14,000 Jedi. And England and Wales together reported more than 390,000 Jedi. It's the 4th largest religion in that census.
That's wild.
Yeah. There are more Jedi in England and Wales at this time, according to the census, than there were Sikhs, more than there were Buddhists. There are more Jedis than Jews in England and Wales at this time.
There's a
So
lot
many.
of Jedi in the world.
Yeah. And so the biggest numbers were reported in England and Wales, which is pretty cool. What's really interesting to me is that there were more than 2,000 people in Scotland said that Jediism is the religion they were raised with.
Wow.
Additionally, Scotland also reported 14 people in the census saying that they were Siths.
Not to be confused with Sikhs.
Correct.
How many people just like check the wrong box? There's no Sith box on the census, I hope.
They weren't check boxes. They were
Actually
filling
fill them
just right in your religion.
Wow.
And that's like 600,000 people. As many Dudists priests as there are today, there were that many people telling the world and the various national census reports that they were Jedis 20 years ago.
Well, and this is where we get back to that spectrum we were talking about of how many of these people believe truly. And I imagine somewhere in that 2,000 people, they probably do if you were raised with it. And then I'm sure there's a huge portion that are just like, oh, it'd be funny to put Jedi on the census.
I mean, there's definitely a bunch of people who just thought it'd be funny.
Yeah.
Almost every one of these people, though not all of them, but probably almost all of them, probably identify as agnostic or atheist, realistically. But I bet you an awful lot of them genuinely believe in ghosts. Or the possibility of ghosts, maybe. That might be more correct to say.
Even just like the universal energy.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Arguably, that's the force.
And this idea that you just should be a good person and not give in to negative emotions, I mean, that's a pretty easy thing to say, yeah, I believe that that's good. So It's an interesting religion to look at.
I love the story you put about the founder of the Church of Jediism.
Oh, yes. Yes. In 2005, there was the Temple of the Jedi Order that was registered in Texas. They were granted IRS tax exemption 10 years later, just 2015. And in 2006, just the year after the temple was set up in Texas, 2 Jedi delivered a protest letter to UN officials in recognition of International Day of Tolerance. In their letter, they decided that it should be called the Interstellar Day of Tolerance and cited the 2001 census showing 390,000 Jedi in England and Wales as a good reason to expand this title.
It didn't get changed, did it?
Oh, of course not.
Okay.
But they tried real hard.
That's good. Fight for what you believe in. And arguably they're true Jedi. As in they truly
As
believe
much as
in it.
anyone is.
Yeah, if you're going to take that time out of your day to write a letter to the UN.
Right? The next year, 2007, is a story that I love. I shared with your husband earlier. I crack up every time I think about it.
When I read it, yeah.
Daniel Jones founded the Church of Jediism with his brother, Barney. I'm just going crazy as I try and read. They believe that the 2001 UK census recognized Jediism as a religion, and that there was more Jedi than Scientologists in Britain.
Truth. He's not wrong.
Right? That's pretty solid. In 2009, just a couple years later, the founder was removed from a Tesco supermarket in North Wales for refusing to remove his hood on a religious basis.
Okay, this Tesco owner, this is a power move. This is big dick energy from the Tesco owner.
I love it. It's just wonderful. The owner justified Jones' ejection by saying he hasn't been banned. Jedis are very welcome to shop in our stores, although we would ask them to remove their hoods. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, and Luke Skywalker all appeared hoodless without ever going over to the dark side. And we are only aware of the Emperor as the one who never removed his hood.
Who's calling out the founder as evil.
He's definitely pointing out some issues that maybe Jones might have some more allegiance to the Sith than the Jedi.
Oh, dear.
Even though we definitely see the Sith without their hoods too. He makes a strong argument as far as the movies go.
Big dick energy.
And I think it's great.
I love it. Another movie religion. You should pair this episode with our Jesus of the Silver Screen episode. Just saying. If you haven't listened to that one,
Makes good sense to me.
listen to it after because it's a good one. And it relates to this a lot. Is a matrixism. That's really hard to say. Matrixism.
Yeah, the mouth doesn't like forming those sounds that close
Not
together.
in English.
No.
Which is based off of
The Matrix.
which is another Neo is a Christ figure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So just like Luke Skywalker. So we're not, it's not a far stretch to see how this could be made into a religion. It was created in 2004, which I presume is when a bunch of the Matrix movies came out.
Close. The first one came out in 1999.
Wow.
And then 2 sequels came out almost back to back in 2003.
Okay. They were good movies. I remember those better than the most recent Star Wars.
Fair enough. The sequels were decent. My complaint is probably the same as most other people's, that they really dumbed down the philosophical elements for the sequels.
Yeah. It has the 4 tenets of Matrixism.
Are you saying tenant or tenant?
Tenets.
Tenet. There's only one N in a principle.
Not David Tennant.
Right.
The 4
A
tenants.
tenant is somebody who lives and rents in a
Or
space.
you're David Tennant, the best doctor
Right.
of the entire show.
He's pretty great.
He's hands down my favorite. Anyway, That's a different episode. The 4 tenets of Matrixism. Number 1, they believe in a messianic prophecy. Like
Right.
I said, Neo's a Christ figure. Check. Number 2, the use of psychedelic drugs as sacrament.
See, this makes a lot of people get a little uncomfortable, but is it that weird? I think it's actually pretty common for a lot of the really old
I was
primal
going to say
religions.
using drugs in religion is not uncommon. There's even I'm sure there's instances in Christianity where it's been done.
Oh, probably. Rastafarianism is like relies heavily on cannabis,
Yep.
which is pretty light compared to the harder psychedelics, but it's a perception altering.
Which honestly, in the context of the Matrix, makes sense.
Absolutely.
I can see how that won't make Matrixism for everyone, but I understand why it works in their belief system. Number 3, a perception of reality as multi-layered and semi-subjective.
It's complicated and tricky.
Yep, that's easy to, yep.
We talked a lot about some of these ideas in our belief episode, that what is subjective is a hard thing to argue against somebody who sees them differently.
Yeah, so basically everything is subjective.
Pretty much. Reality is perception.
Yeah. And
It's a problem.
absolutely. So I don't even think this is that weird, because we should probably just look at life in general as multi-layered and semi-subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good. All religion should stick that one in, actually.
It might help.
And then number 4 is the adherence to the principles of at least one of the world's major religions. That's interesting.
Yep. To be a true matrixist, you have to believe in the principles of religion.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I'm curious how they outline what counts as
A religion.
acceptable principles.
Or a religion.
Yeah.
Right?
Your question is as good as mine is. It's
Because part of me is like,
very
well, I don't
broad.
like that because I don't want to adhere to anything. But then I can I pick and choose? There's like a handful, like the dude abides.
Yeah, if you don't want to adhere to anything, do you even want to adhere to matrixism?
I guess so. Fair. If I like the first 3, then
You like the real movies, but not the animatrix.
this one hurts my head. I guess it's not surprising. Anyway.
So there is a holy day
Good.
for matrixism. April 19th, known as Bicycle Day. Which is just, that's a weird name for the day, considering that it marks the anniversary of Albert Hoffman's 1943 experiment with LSD. So the symbol, lots of these religions have symbols, and the matrixist symbol is kind of obvious on the surface, but also has some baggage to it, I guess. It's the Japanese symbol, the kanji, for red, which is reference to the red pill that one takes to be extracted
Woke.
from the matrix.
Woke.
You get woke when you get red.
Woke, bro.
And there's, of course, the internet phenomenon of the red pill, which has some serious baggage all on its own.
Yeah, different connotations now than when Matrixism started. So
Yeah.
we'll just gloss over that. So with those 3 covered, 4 Jedi.
I can't count.
Jedi, neither can I. So with those pop culture ones covered, we're going to go to the ones that are based off of Russell's Teapot, and we'll start with Russell's Teapot. So if you haven't heard the theory, we'll start there. So Russell's Teapot is this idea that there is a teapot orbiting the planet between Earth and Mars, or the moon and Mars.
Close. It's
What?
not orbiting a planet. It's just chilling out
Just chilling
between
out
Earth and Mars.
Earth and Mars.
Yeah.
I thought it was moving. Doesn't
I mean,
move?
I'm sure it moves. Both Earth and Mars move.
And this is the start of the commentary on religion and burden of proof. It's used a lot in, I mean, I guess arguments for atheism and agnosticism is that you can't disprove that there isn't a teapot between Earth and Mars.
Right. And I don't have to prove that there is.
Right? So this is where, when we talk about burden of proof, it falls on, the note I found says it falls on the believer, not in this case the atheist, to prove that there is a teapot, right? You can't just say, well, you can't disprove that there's no teapot.
Right.
No, you have to prove that there's a teapot.
And that's the exact way that our legal system works out. If you want to accuse somebody of something, it's not up to them to prove that they didn't do it. It's up to you to prove they did.
That they did, yeah.
And so that same principle applies here, that it's not up to the atheists and agnostics to find any evidence that there's no God. It's up to everybody who believes that he exists to prove it if they want to have this argument.
Yeah, or whatever you believe exists.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's start. So that's the Russell's Teapot Theory. The most famous example, I think, is the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, or Pastafarianism. You're a Pastafarian if you prescribe to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. So the Flying Spaghetti Monster started as a counterpoint to intelligent design or creationism being taught in school.
Yeah, it showed up in 2005 in an open letter addressed to the Kansas State Board of Education after they decided to permit teaching intelligent design in science class, which, if you know anything about science, you know that intelligent design doesn't fit in there.
Yes. And so the argument that that was made is that if you can teach creationism, then you can teach flying spaghetti monsterism.
They should be given equal positions since they have equal scientific evidence.
Backing. And one thing I've read, we don't have it in our notes, but that I've read in the past about flying spaghetti monster as well, is that from the commentary standpoint, is that you can use the flying spaghetti monster as a filter for your beliefs. So if a flying spaghetti monster told you to do it, does it make sense? Or is it still okay? Right? So if a flying spaghetti monster tells you to love your neighbor, okay, yeah, I can get behind that. That's not a terrible thing. Mm-hmm. If the flying spaghetti monster says you have to stay in your house when you're on the rag and saucy like me, you're like, that's kind of weird. I'm the only one that can have red sauce. I assume that's what he'd say. He'd be jealous of your menstruation. Then it's a little, you're like, that's kind of weird, flying spaghetti monster.
That's great.
So that's and Pastafarians are also well known for religious garb. That the big thing is that they wear colanders on their heads in situations where, where people are, arguing that they want to wear their religious garb. And just, again, pointing it out so you can get your driver's license with a colander on your head if you cite religious reasons for it.
And it works in some places and not others. There are loads of places where they have approved for your legal ID in various forms, whether it's your gun license, your driver's license, whatever. There are loads of places that have said, yes, it's okay for you to have your colander on your head because it's a religious garment. And basically as many others saying, no, that's nonsense. Just
like Judaism and Jediism, you can be ordained. Mm-hmm. You can perform weddings as a Pastafarian. I think you're a Pastafarian minister.
Yeah, it's actually one of the
term is, but As a clergy of the Pastafarians, you can perform weddings.
It's one of the loudest complaints against Pastafarianism is actually that the ordination mill, and there's a huge fight going on about who gets to say that this religion is a legitimate religion and this religion is just an ordination mill. Who gets to decide what criteria are valid criteria to decide who gets to perform a marriage?
Well, and then we get into this, which this will be a whole different episode, but the idea of what the sanctity of marriage is, and you know, this whole idea of like it matters who performs your wedding.
Right.
I get it. So where we are in Canada, it's quite strict because people make their livings marrying people, and that's why they're pretty strict about who's allowed to marry, so that the people who do it for a living can make a living. And so that I get. But other than that, it's like
the province employs a dozen people basically part-time to do this. As far as job creation, it's not a strong action.
No, it's not, but yeah. Anyway.
It's a move of authority. That's it. Just look at me swing around my dick.
Oh,
That's basically what the government's doing.
Raunchiest Preston's ever got on this podcast. Yeah, so this is, like I said, this is just I think the most popular example of commentary on religion, and I'm into it. I like seeing the flying spaghetti monsters on the backs of cars.
Right. There are holidays for Pastafarians too.
I love these. I want to be a Pastafarian.
The best two, in my opinion,
I was reading this
is Pastover and Ramadan.
I want to celebrate Ramadan.
Pastover, kind of obvious, eat pasta. Ramadan gets a little bit more specific. You gotta eat ramen.
Ramen pasta. I'm into
Gotta have those instant noodles.
Yes. I really want ramen. Yeah, we have pho broth in our house too that I don't know what to do with.
So the biggest highlight for Pastafarians that is pretty easy to get behind, I think, is the absolute rejection of dogma and formalism. That even the writings and the more well-published things that we know about Pastafarianism, they're all just suggestions anyway.
Well, and I think that comes back to it's basically an atheist religion.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's
which
deliberately a parody.
I understand that's an oxymoron, but it is meant to question religion. I love this one too. Is it the Church of? It is the invisible pink unicorn. So good. It's an internet meme, basically.
Basically.
And it's one of those things you can't prove it doesn't exist. It is both pink and invisible at the same time. The quote from who I assume is the creator, or
Not the creator. Sarah
practitioner.
Ellie.
Sarah Ellie, she says, invisible pink unicorns are beings of great spiritual power. I believe that. We know this because they are capable of being invisible and pink at the same time. Like all religions, the faith of the invisible pink unicorns is based upon both logic and faith. We have faith that they are pink. We logically know that they are invisible because we can't see them.
It's pretty solid.
Right? I mean, let's look at that. Let's take that lens and look at literally every religion we've talked about.
Right. And the adherents of the invisible pink unicorn have been around for decades. The invisible pink unicorn first showed up in Usenet forums. For all of you.
It's an internet meme. It's the first internet meme.
Yeah, this is so far back. This was 1990.
There was like 3 people on the internet in 1990.
I mean, at the time, the internet was pretty much just for nerds and the really creepy people. The dangerous people.
The dangerous. They're still on there.
And people running really big businesses who wanted to get on early enough to get their domain name before it got expensive.
I mean, that's really smart, actually.
Yeah, but those were nerds too.
www.holywatermelon.com. We've bought it, so don't try.
Right?
Thanks. I know someone's like furiously Googling as I said that. No, we've bought it. We just don't have a website yet.
We're working on it. And yeah, it's paradoxical by being obvious that you can't prove that this unicorn does or doesn't exist.
It's because you can't see
and
it
it's
doesn't mean it's not
paradoxical
there.
in that, yeah, it's invisible and pink. It's loads of fun. It's a cool thought experiment, and there's a community built up around this paradox.
Well, and I mean, this is basically Russell's teapot. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Right?
Or insert any
Yeah.
anything. I just think that's a cute one.
It's pretty great.
And the last parody. Yeah, this one's interesting. We've talked about it before on the Jesus of the Silver Scream episode. It's Our Lady of Perpetual Exemption, which is the John Oliver religion that he creates. I would actually call this more of a satire.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
the
a
whole
satire.
thing was an exercise in satire.
Satire on, as opposed to a parody, on Christianity.
Especially
And-
those dirtbags that want to preach on TV and steal your money and collect your seed money for the prosperity gospel.
Yeah, we're going to do a whole episode on prosperity gospel and seed faith. Yeah, so his is absolutely a commentary on... Sorry, I just read the quote. So it's called seed faith, which this idea is that you will plant a monetary seed and then God will reward you with
Give you
abundance.
more money.
So John Oliver does this whole sketch. I highly recommend. It's about 40 minutes long. But because it's called seed faith, at the very end of the episode, he says, when someone sends you jizz through the mail, it's time to stop whatever you're doing. So someone literally sent him jizz.
He got so many gifts and donations.
Oh, yeah.
So this church existed for about a month, from August to September of 2015. And yeah, it was just satire, nonsense.
Oh, sorry, I'm just going to jump. It was also a commentary on, so obviously it was a satire of Christianity and seed faith, but also a commentary on what is a religion and then how the IRS deals with religious institutions and how convoluted that all is. Sorry, jump.
Yeah,
jump
it was a complicated, multifaceted, wonderful piece of satire that lasted a month. And he got all kinds of donations. He got giant penis statues. He got bags of seeds in reference to the seed faith. He got jars of semen in reference to seed faith. He also raised $70,000 for Doctors Without Borders.
Tax-free,
because of his church status, he raised $70,000. He gave it all to Doctors Without Borders, which is
great,
awesome, I think. But yeah, that quote is an excellent way to finish your 1 month long religious excursion.
And it's a good rule to live by. Just everyone, whenever you receive jizz in the mail, stop doing whatever you're doing. Reevaluate your life.
I love it. John Oliver, very clever guy.
Yeah. To wrap up this episode, I want to revisit those questions. So we've talked about parody religions that are based in mostly pop culture, and we've talked about parody religions that are based in atheism.
Mm-hmm.
So
are they real religions?
Are they real religions? Yeah.
And I think that it's a lot easier to say yes than no.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I think this goes back more to our belief episode, and you can't tell someone what they believe.
It's nonsense.
You also can't even police it, right? We can only do what we're doing now and having conversations around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'll always go back to my point, as long as you're not hurting anyone, who the fuck cares?
Right? And the question of belief, how important is that to religion? It doesn't matter if people really believe that somebody out there can wield the force for anybody to say that they belong to the Church of the Jedi.
I guess it depends on why you've gotten into religion.
Yeah.
Which is a topic we actually haven't addressed. But yeah, if you're getting into it for community, then it doesn't matter if you believe, as long as you like the people you're with.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hoping to find a higher power, maybe these ones aren't the right ones for you.
Feel free to shop around.
Yeah. And some of them might be, maybe the flying spaghetti monster is the higher power. I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on what you're looking for. Maybe the Force is the higher power. If you're looking for answers to where we go when we die, I don't actually think any of these address that particularly well, but...
Not really, as far as I'm aware.
But I also think that's a really poor reason to get into religion.
Yep.
If just because you're scared to die. But yeah, so these ones probably aren't for you if that's your current concern. I hope it's not your current concern. Yeah, so that would be my answer of how important belief is. And of course, I'm sure there's diehard pink unicorns out there.
Maybe.
If you're a diehard member of the Church of the Invisible Pink Unicorn, can you please email us at holywatermelonpod@gmail.com? Because I would really like to speak with you.
Or feel free to look us up on Facebook or Instagram.
Oh, I love how we're getting all this in. Our Discord is also up on those social media sites if you need our Discord link to join our server. We are having a ton of great conversations. And you can always request episodes like our good friend Tim did. So thank you again, Tim, for this fantastic episode. I hope you enjoyed it.
And thank all of you for listening.
Peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself. God is near.